What's up, everybody? It's Andreas Hale of the Corner Podcast here with the founder, the president, the CEO, the man behind All Elite Wrestling, Tony Khan. It's funny because Tony just gave me shit about the intro a few minutes ago.
I did not. I love this intro. We could do it again, but I think you're just so kind. Thanks for having me on your show.
Of course.
This is great.
It's been a long time coming. It's funny because as we're recording the show, most people that are listening to it are going to listen to it after Double or Nothing. But tonight, we just watched Boston lose to Miami, push a Game 7. And the question I want to ask that people do want to know is, when you see stuff like this, how does it affect you booking and putting together your pay-per-view?
I think that when we went into it, having looked at the scheduling, I thought there was a pretty good chance that a Game 7 was possible. And we've never done this, but normally we have an out around 9 Pacific, which here in the Vegas. And I thought it would be good to push it back in case there was a Game 7 because you don't want to rush things. And I think it's possible millions of people would watch that. I think we're going to get a huge amount of interest in Double or Nothing, but knowing that you've potentially millions of people watching a Game 7 on TV, I know how I purchase pay-per-views on a Saturday night and a weekend. In this case, it's a holiday weekend, so right. Sports competition. And for example, when like UFC runs on a Saturday night, I often will be watching football because that's a big part of my life and part of my job. And when the football's over on Saturday night, college football ends up, you end up watching UFC. And a lot of times I'll check, has a main event gone to the ring yet? Have the big matches, big fights on the card happened? And if there's a couple big fights or the main event still out there, I'm very interested in still watching it. And I can always go back and watch earlier parts of the card later. So I know that most of the buys are going to come at the start of the show, but knowing that there's millions of potential customers watching this basketball Game 7, I think it's a good opportunity to still capture maybe even thousands of buys, and that's a lot of revenue. So when that adds up, so it's really important to try and capture as much as we can. Obviously, you don't want to go up against big games, but we'll see how it works out. But I think there'll be a lot of interest in Double or Nothing.
All right, so I want to start with this. You are a regular on Twitter. You tweeted about having dinner with Dana White, and you tweeted, "Hey, I got to tell him about Money in the Bank."
I was surprised he hadn't heard yet because we ate at like 8:30 and he hadn't heard, and it had been announced earlier in the day, so nobody had told him. He was happy.
That's what I was about to ask. What was his immediate reaction? Because now Money in the Bank, for those who don't know, is moved from Allegiant Stadium to MGM Grand, which is a big reduction in attendance.
It's like, look, the reason I thought it was interesting is because UFC in this town is so strong, and I have so much respect for Dana White. And when I brought it up to him, he pointed out to me that it's International Fight Week, which is another reason why it would be crazy to take on UFC on a Saturday night in Las Vegas. And I just have so much respect for Dana and UFC. I would never try such a thing. And I just also really like Dana. He's been very nice to me, and all the people at UFC, Hunter Campbell and all the people that work there with Dana have been really nice to me and very kind to host me at the shows. And I don't know nearly as much about UFC as I do about a lot of other sports. And I find it really interesting. I like the fighting, and it's very different than pro wrestling, but I think it's very cool. And I don't know as much about it though. So he told me, on top of what I was saying, it's crazy to take on UFC in Las Vegas on a Saturday night. And he said, and it's International Fight Week, which I know is huge. I mean, even not knowing everything about UFC, I know that's a huge week. So on top of that, yeah, when he pointed that out, I think, he was pleased to see that they're going to probably do very well that night. And I think it's gratifying in a head-to-head competition always. And I know for UFC, Dana's a really competitive guy, and he's also just been so kind to me. And with AEW, some of the people from UFC have come to the shows, which is awesome. And I like going to their shows.
What was the meet? I know you don't want to give up all the details, but I do want to know, because on Rampage, we just watched Sammy, Frankie, Ty go to American Top Team, smash the glass, take those titles. Is that something you discussed with Dana beforehand?
Yeah, with the company. Yeah. I don't, every detail that we do business-wise, I don't always have to take it up to Dana, but I think we talked at a business level and he was aware of what we were doing and we did talk about it. Yeah.
And he was okay because, I mean, they took the BMF title. They took what else did they take? One of the UFC titles. And I believe the old TNT title, correct?
They took several of Dan's belts, and yes, you're right. They took the BMF title. We all know who that belongs to.
Yeah, and Dana he said, cool. He was all good with it.
They gave us permission to utilize their stuff, and it was really cool.
Is there conversations happening? I don't know if there's going to be some synergy with AEW and the UFC, or is there something?
I would love it. I'm not trying to put any pressure on them. I don't like to take my friends and force them to do business stuff with me. I just if I have friends, I try not to let our business stuff conflict as much as possible. I try to keep our stuff conflicting as little as possible is what I mean. So as much as I can, I try to avoid it. And I don't like running head-to-head shows with them, and I don't think it makes any sense for either of us because a lot of people like both shows, and they are one of the biggest sports properties in the world, and also they've just been really nice to me. Dana and Hunter and the whole team there have been really nice, and I think Dana's a great leader and has built a great thing with the UFC, so it was great to see him and bring my dad to hang out, and then being the one to get to break that to Dana just is a cherry on top of what was a very great day for me.
And then you tweeted about it, and it was like, oh, man. You had to take some satisfaction being able to tweet that, hey, my competitor just moved from a big, gigantic 50,000 stadium to an arena, which is still nice.
It's a great arena. We sold it out. They were going to sell it out. It's great. I just thought, to be honest, if it wasn't UFC, I wouldn't take as much interest in it. But I think going head-to-head with my friend in his own town is pretty nuts.
It's nuts. All right, so I want to ask a few quick questions before we get into the nitty-gritty. We talk about this on the podcast all the time. I got to ask you, are we getting trios titles? Is it still a thought? Like, where are we with this?
Well, I think it's something that I would really like to do. We've got a great group of trios in AEW. Fans are asking for it all the time. I think it makes a lot of sense. There's a number of markets that we need to service, and I think trios are popular in many parts of the world. I think it would be great, and we have the trios to make it really good.
Is it a timing thing at this point?
I think the timing is not far off. I'm very interested in doing it, and to be honest, I have the belts. I've had them made. I possess trios belts, so it'll happen.
Okay. Update on the status of Kenny Omega.
I look forward to a time when Kenny Omega's back wrestling for AEW. It's going to happen. I'm sure when he's ready, but I also don't want to put pressure on him to come back before he's ready. He's one of the greatest wrestlers in the world. I really believe he's been such a great champion for AEW and a great leader. And I think Kenny Omega is one of the best wrestlers you could ever ask for in your promotion. And whenever he can come back and wrestle at a high level, which is the only way he knows how to wrestle, then we can't wait to have him back.
All right. 3 years ago, we're in Las Vegas. The first Double or Nothing happens.
Yep.
The big story coming out, Jon Moxley comes down. It's the big get for you.
Yep.
3 years later, you couldn't have possibly fathomed the market that has been opened up to you for talent. I'm curious because you have a plan, obviously. You know, when you first come into this business, you think things are going to go a certain way, and then all this talent gets into the market. How much have your plans changed from day one to where we are today?
Many things are different, but a lot of things are similar. We really built a lot of the stars from the beginning, people I thought who had a huge following in pro wrestling, but not a lot of experience on national television in America. And a lot of those people have gone on and to become top stars for us and had really important runs in our first 3 years and are going to continue to be really important for years to come. And I think our first 3 years were about establishing some of these stars and also building around many of our stars who had national TV experience, like Chris Jericho and Jon Moxley, who you mentioned. And then we added stars continuously as we went. Now there's a number of people in AEW who have a ton of national TV experience and tend to draw great numbers for us.
Now, obviously, being back in Vegas is the location where CM Punk did the pipe bomb. Was this in your mind when you were booking this match for Hangman and Punk for the title? This is where, not necessarily where it all started, but this is a pillar for Punk.
It's a huge town in the history of CM Punk. It's also a huge town in the history of Hangman Page. And
Jericho.
He's where he won the Casino Battle Royale and got the chance to wrestle Jericho. He won, if you remember, he won that first match before the pay-per-view, and then Jericho won the main event against Kenny.
Yep.
Mox came out. Of course, it set up a lot of things. It set up Jericho versus Hangman at All Out as the main event for the first ever world title match, and then Jericho became the first ever champion, beat Hangman. And then, of course, went on. What a great run Chris had. Our first several months of television and through our first couple pay-per-views. Jon Moxley won the title right as the pandemic started and never really got a fair chance to defend the title. And I think he was a great, great, great champion to help AEW through the pandemic. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. And also, I thought he had so many great matches, some in empty arenas and some later with fans there with 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 fans physically distanced in a building that holds between 5,000 and 5,500, Daly's Place. So when we brought the physically distanced crowds back, that was great, and he had some great matches in that environment. But he was the guy who carried us through the pandemic, and then Kenny Omega, what a run! Like I said, he's had. What a great wrestler. Hangman Page and Kenny Omega from the very beginning of AEW. You asked me things that have gone from basically when our run started. I had put them in a tag match together on one of the first Dynamites, the third episode in Philadelphia against Jon Moxley and Pac. And I really liked the idea of Kenny and Hangman teaming. And then there was really something with it. And definitely in the back of my mind, I thought there was something there, and then kept it going. And they became our best tag team, our champions, and had the best match to that point. And probably we still are, I think, that we've ever had with Kenny and Hangman against the Young Bucks at Revolution 2020, right before the pandemic. Again, same night John won the title from Chris. And so those champions and what's happened with the title, I think it's, again, been building from the very beginning, but certainly, we've added a lot of great stars along the way. And the core of the first four champions with Jericho, Moxley, Kenny, and Hangman has really always been there from day one.
I mean, the significance isn't lost on us. Punk comes out this week. Obviously, again, people are going to watch this after Double or Nothing, but it felt like it was the right time for Punk. A lot of people said when he showed up, why is he in the title picture immediately? It felt like you slow played this on purpose. Was it always the plan to do Double or Nothing in Vegas and have Punk in the title picture?
Well, I thought it would be the perfect timing to have a world title match and have him get his first chance at the title, because he had been, upon arrival, saying he wanted to come in, he wanted to prove himself, he wanted to get back into pro wrestling, fight the young wrestlers he hasn't fought. And then along the way, there were veterans who challenged him, and I thought some veterans who deserve more respect. Matt Sydal on television, they did a great number in the biggest spot for us in the Friday Night War, and we won that night because of them. And then we also had the benefit of his match, his program with Eddie Kingston, the promos they did to build up an amazing match at Full Gear. But he came in, said he wanted to wrestle the young wrestlers. He had some great veteran matches along the way, but he wrestled great young wrestlers, and he had awesome matches with wrestlers like Darby Allin, Daniel Garcia, and then our best program of the whole year with MJF. Yeah. And so he's come in and earned the position, won the big matches, and proved it time after time where he deserved now to get a chance at the title finally. So this was his first chance after going through a lot to earn the opportunity. And I thought that would be really cool.
When you signed Punk, and then we'll move off Punk in a minute, but when you signed Punk, did you expect him to want to work with the young talent the way that he has? I mean, he worked with Powerhouse Hobbs.
Before he came and signed here, he listed 5 wrestlers he wanted to work with, and he's wrestled a few of them now. He put a list out of people he thought was excellent. And of course, Darby was on that list.
Yes.
And I know he really respected Powerhouse Hobbs. That was somebody he wanted to get in with very early. So those were his first 2 opponents. Mm-hmm. And then from there, a lot of people that weren't necessarily the young wrestlers he wanted to wrestle, but people I thought would be dream matches. And I think against Eddie Kingston, he had an awesome one, and some great ones along the way. But along that path, he found a very memorable rival. I think it'll be historically remembered with CM Punk and MJF.
Which is excellent. We've talked about Eddie Kingston a couple times. How good is this man? Eddie Kingston has come onto the scene, and he's proven that you're never too old to get a run. His Players Tribune article was fantastic. How proud are you of this man and what he's accomplished?
I'm very proud of Eddie Kingston, and I think he's earned a top spot in this company. He could be a top star in any wrestling company in the world. And from his arrival here through the pandemic, I always thought the crowds would get behind him when we got back in front of the arenas, and everywhere we go, the fans get behind Eddie and chant Eddie, Eddie, and I think it's awesome. And very happy for him, and certainly he deserves it. Like I said, he's a veteran who deserves a lot of respect, and that's why I thought he'd be a great opponent for CM Punk to put that kind of international, worldwide spotlight on him that he deserves as a center of attention. He'd been in big matches, he'd main event matches for us before,
Right.
but I think the biggest spotlight in many ways to that point was probably wrestling CM Punk, who had just arrived and was white hot and is now white hot and has been great for us since he arrived. And I think Eddie Kingston and Punk for Full Gear was one of the really important matches on that show. And I thought a couple years back, Eddie Kingston versus Jon Moxley, I Quit, was an excellent match in a big position also on Full Gear. So he's come and hit home run after home run for us. And I think the run of pay-per-view matches that Eddie Kingston's on has been tremendous. And if you look at Eddie Kingston going back to All Out, had that amazing match to start it with Miro that I thought was a classic and such a great effort, such a great fight from both men, Eddie and Miro. And I love that match at All Out. And then Full Gear, Eddie had the great match with CM Punk and the run of matches he's been on. And then to have the match at Revolution with Chris Jericho it was a win for Eddie Kingston. It was a great match. It was one of both men's best matches in AEW, which is really saying something because both Eddie Kingston and Chris Jericho have had some of the best matches we've had in AEW. And I think that was possibly near the top for both men, that opening match on Revolution. What a match. And then again, match after match, Eddie delivers. So he's on an amazing run for us and he really deserves it.
Let's clear something up. Where's Miro?
Well, he's somebody who I will be an important part of AEW. I really like Miro, but sometimes I think you can build anticipation for seeing somebody and build to a big anticipation of a comeback.
Okay. Because, the rumors are, is he hurt? Is he doing TV? Is he doing something else? But there is a plan for Miro. It's not that he's just not around.
Yeah. There's definitely a plan for Miro. Miro's important.
Okay. Just curious because, we haven't seen him for a while.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Miro.
Yeah.
Jade Cargill. This woman there's nothing like her. We've never seen anything like Jade Cargill. Now, obviously, when you signed her, you knew what you had. But has she exceeded the expectations of what you thought she could be already?
Yes, absolutely. And I had high expectations. We don't typically take in wrestlers without any match experience. Usually the wrestlers who come to AEW aren't being trained in-house by AEW. We aren't a performance center. We have people who come in with experience from other companies and other promotions. And then we do occasionally take in some young wrestlers, but not in the spots Jade was in, wrestling on live television, on Dynamite, and then Rampage later, and our pay-per-views. So when Jade came in, I had big expectations, but no, I had no idea that she would learn so quickly because I think she's been one of the fastest rising students in the game, and she's been such a great champion for us. And everywhere you go, people really look at Jade and say, even if they aren't wrestling fans, when Jade walks around with a championship belt, whether it's at a big sporting event like a big basketball game or a hockey game where Jade goes to represent the company to promote AEW on TBS and on TNT, she is the TBS champion and appears on both Dynamite on TBS and Rampage on TNT. She promotes the shows, and at big events, people always go, "Wow, that's the champion! Oh my gosh, like what a great champion for TBS!"
Right.
So I think Jade's been an amazing signing. She's done so well. And so, yeah, I had really high expectations, but who could have expected she'd learn so quickly?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, not only that, we talk about her work in the ring and how much it's improved, but you're looking at somebody who is a crossover star, who has the potential to do things outside of pro wrestling. Is that something that I don't want to say you have to control, but it's like you want to help her?
Yeah, I want Jade to be a huge star. I think it's great. I mean, I encourage it. I think we want people doing projects, and we have a lot of great wrestlers here. And if somebody gets a big mainstream booking, we can sustain that. We can help them. So I encourage people to book big things and try to help them. So I hope Jade gets lots of crossover success, and it's great for Jade and it's great for AEW. I think she's a great person for anybody to hire for any project, and AEW is always looking to partner with people.
I mean, she's amazing. We're on the 4th TNT title redesign. Is there a particular reason?
Well, I really like different straps and different colors, and for each champion, there's been people putting different designs and different patterns. The original belt was made during the pandemic, so it wasn't fully fashioned. And then we had a design that was associated with Mr. Brody Lee, that original design. And we have had a redesign since then because we got a custom SoCal belt, this Lakers style for Scorpio Sky of formerly of SCU, who's a big Lakers fan, and it's very associated with that part of his character. And so I wanted him to get a fresh start with a new belt.
So is that something we may see as we get new TNT champions? They have the opportunities to have the belt?
I'm not always gonna, and who knows how long somebody's gonna be champion.
Right.
But in this case, I thought it would be cool going into our debut in Southern California to have that belt.
Well done. Want to pivot a little bit. Obviously, Cody left the company. Have you watched what he's done on WWE television at all, or is that something you paid attention?
Yeah, a good amount. Yeah, I watch a lot of wrestling. I
was gonna
watch
ask you
different
that.
wrestling companies. I watch a lot of different wrestling shows.
What have you thought about Cody moving on? Obviously, you said there was an amicable split.
Yeah.
Everything is okay. When you see him in WWE, do you say, okay, that's probably where he needed to be?
I don't say that at all. I love Cody and I love working with him, and I think he's a great wrestler. And when I watch it, I think, as I do with a lot of great wrestlers, when I watch them in other promotions, I think a lot of the stuff he's doing is great. And in general, just pay attention to a lot of the wrestling outside of AEW too.
Let's talk about diversity. Me and you have talked about
Yeah, sure.
you. There was a time where you were getting a lot of flack on social media about diversity in AEW. And I think a lot of people can look now and say, well, kind of rectified that. We look at the people that are involved. But I want to go back a little bit because I think a lot of people don't understand where you came from.
Sure.
And I think we grew up both in the 80s, be pro wrestling fans in the early 90s. And being minorities, we watched wrestlers that looked like us be stereotyped and criticized, and they were never champions and things of that nature. But for you in particular, what was your first experience seeing somebody that looked like you? And maybe you were too young to really reconcile what was going on, but I'm assuming that maybe your father or your mother saw what you were watching. What were their thoughts on what they saw?
Well, my parents weren't wrestling fans to begin with, so it wasn't just like some of the stereotypes. There were a lot of things they didn't like about wrestling, but there were a lot of things about wrestling in hindsight back then that you'd look at now and kind of scratch your head. But yeah, it was like General Adnan and Colonel Mustafa were like the main guys when I was a
Right.
kid, and they were like top heels. And my dad looks a lot like General Adnan and a lot like Saddam Hussein. So it's like there is definitely a resemblance there. So it was not pleasant for many reasons, not just wrestling, but many reasons at that point for a lot of people. And I thought it was not, to me, a big deal at the time. And I hadn't really put a lot of thought into it. But Sanjay Dutt is somebody I work with really closely. And it probably wasn't until Sanjay, when I was in college, really, it wasn't when I was a kid. I couldn't remember like an Indian pro wrestler with a pretty straightforward presentation that wasn't something making fun of them. And there had been some other good Indian pro wrestlers, I think, but he was the first guy I could remember who could really go.
Right.
So I always really liked Sanjay. I think he's great. And I've gotten to work with him since, really closely. And he's a tremendous person. He adds tons of value to the company. And I really like him a lot. But I've been a fan of his for a long time. And I think he was and eventually he did do some stuff that was a little different and maybe a little more stereotypical. But it's, at the end of the day, I believe that we've got, but I just think wrestling in general, it's come a long way. And I think wrestling's awesome right now. There's a lot of great stars, a lot of great young stars, a lot of great champions, and there's a lot of diversity in wrestling. And also, the media partners have been really supportive and great too. I was part of an Asian American Diversity Month,
Yes.
Asian American Pacific Islander Month, and that was really cool that TBS and TNT asked me to participate in that. And they featured other people from AEW during AAPI month, with other people featured like Wheeler Yuta and Riho in the commercials. And those commercials ran on TBS and TNT, not just in AEW, all month. That was awesome. And the new management at Warner Brothers Discovery has been awesome. Like, we've got a really, really great opportunity. I'm just so proud pro wrestling is back on TBS and TNT, because again, when we were younger, that was a thing. That was
Huge.
a big thing. And I think it's great for the fans to have it back. and we have a really great management. They really like what we're doing, and they see the results that we delivered, and it's really cool. So I think we're getting to do great things, and um, the fact that they would include me in that, I was honored by, and the so it's cool. I think that there was nothing like that when I was a kid, and certainly it was like a dream come true to be on TBS in a wrestling commercial with wrestlers from AEW
Right.
featured in it. It was really awesome.
I mean, so here's the thing. So it's like for me, a little bit about myself is when I was growing up, I didn't think about like how they presented Coco Beware and Junkyard Dog. And then one day, my grandmother's a full-blooded Italian white woman. My grandmother loved Ken Patera. My grandmother loved Bob Backlund. My grandmother loved them. She hated anybody that was a minority because they were presented as like terrorists and evil people. It wasn't until I saw the Nation of Domination and my grandmother booed them on television that I was like, oh shit, something's wrong. The presentation is wrong. And from that point on, I always thought diversity was important in pro wrestling and representation, how people were presented. I don't know if you've had a similar moment where you said, okay, I want to present diversity in a way where it's not the heels don't always have to look a certain way.
Sure.
The baby faces have to look a certain way. But it seems like you've taken on that now in to represent all the diaspora, everybody, right? But was there a moment where you recognized that you wanted to do something about this?
Yeah, I think for a long time I had wanted to, create a TBS title, and I think it's no secret that we had big plans for Jade for a long time, and I think she's a great example of somebody who's come in and is a standout star, that's a crossover star, that is somebody that we can be really proud of as a champion, that inspires a lot of people, I think, and also, for a while, I think in terms of free agents, I wasn't sure that we were kind of training people from the ground up, trying to build a more diverse company. And we really, a lot of our stars that have come up that are minorities originally started out wrestling on AEW Dark, where we were trying to build a developmental system in Daly's place during the pandemic. And, I say we don't train wrestlers, and these were all independent wrestlers that we brought in, packaged differently, gave, looks to, gave more matches, and then people I took interest in. And so we built a more diverse roster, in part when trying to use AEW Dark to find stars. So people like Powerhouse Hobbs, Red Velvet, Max Caster, and Anthony Bowen separately, not as a tag team yet, but I really liked them and thought that we could put them together and make a team that's become the Acclaimed. And the presentation with, I saw Max doing the rap on Twitter, and I thought it would be really good as the entrance for them. And it's become such an important part of their presentation, a huge part of our shows. And they're a great team now too. They trained and went to school together wrestling, but
Right.
they hadn't been a team. So a lot of it early on was in the pandemic in Dark. I was like, this is an opportunity in the chaos of this that we can use being in Daly's place on the closed set to have lots of matches and get lots of opportunities to people and try and find people that can become TV stars that are mostly wrestling on Dark and are not the center of the show yet. And then a lot of great free agents became available. So we were
Yes.
able to build opportunities for great people, and to have some of these big name free agents out there. I think it helped us build, again, a more diverse, better roster. So for a long time, it's something I wanted to do. And really from the beginning of the company, it's something I've, and going back as long as I've watched pro wrestling, I think it's really important. And, like I said, I got a chance to talk on TBS a little bit about my father's background as he came over from Pakistan. And, when I watched wrestling as a kid, there weren't tons of opportunities, uh, for people who would have looked like him or me. And I think it's cool because the wrestling's spreading all over the world now. And it's crazy because there's so many, uh, aspiring pro wrestlers coming out of that part of the world that he's from. So that's really cool too. And there's definitely a big interest in pro wrestling over there, as we've seen with digital traffic. It's huge in
Right.
Pakistan and India. So I definitely believe uh, there's been a lot of great progress in the world of pro wrestling, and I love the pro wrestling business, and followed it my whole life, and I've watched it change a lot, and there's some things that are probably better, and there's other things that probably people would argue aren't as good as when we were kids about wrestling today. But overall, I think there's a lot of great things happening in wrestling right now here in AEW and all over the world. And it's cool to bring in, like I said, about the timing during Asian American Pacific Islander Month and the great ad campaign that TBS and TNT put together with it. Also to have the announcement of Forbidden Door
Yes.
coming up and to work with New Japan Pro Wrestling, which I think is great to introduce some of those great wrestlers here in America on a wider audience and put some dream matches together. I think it's great.
Okay. What is Eric Bischoff's problem with you?
I don't know.
What's going on? Every time I turn around, Eric Bischoff is saying something. CM Punk is the worst investment in pro wrestling. But I'm not trying to cast anything on Eric Bischoff, but I saw you sign a ton of people at WCW that seemed like bad investments as well. Do you have any relationship with Bischoff? Any interaction?
I haven't talked to him in a while. I don't have I haven't spoken a bad word to him because we haven't talked in a while. But I like Eric when we talk, and I've said this before. If I saw him right now, I think we'd probably shake hands and talk, and it would be fine. But I guess we just disagree on a lot of stuff. We were pretty positive at one point, and then he just started saying pretty negative stuff around the time CM Punk came in, and I didn't think it was really fair because he's talked about financial stuff and investments, and he doesn't really understand our financials or the things that we value as our top revenue streams. And a lot of the major revenue streams, CM Punk's made a huge bottom line difference, and he's really helped the company grow in many ways. We've hit record highs on pay-per-view, merchandising in many ways. We're well up year over year in ratings. The move to TBS has been great, and he's been such a huge part of it. So I think CM Punk's massive success. And I don't think the stuff he said was accurate, but I haven't talked to him or really talked about him much. But I would talk to him. I just haven't really run into him. And to be honest, he called me a while back, and I should probably call him back and talk to him at some point.
I mean, maybe. It's weird because to say those things, the metrics are different. How we gauge wrestling, how the ratings are different. Like, he comes from a different era. So the mere suggestion that CM Punk is a bad investment just seems like, I don't want to say sour grapes, but I'm not sure where that comes from.
Yeah, he called me in. I should probably at some point talk to him about it. I don't have a problem with him. If I saw him, I would gladly talk to him, and at some point I'll probably give him a call and catch up.
And the reason why I thought about Bischoff is because I thought about, I think Booker T had said, oh, I don't know how this Forbidden Door thing is going to do. Like, that's the hardcore New Japan. But then you guys sold out.
Yeah.
How much do you enjoy proving people wrong at this point?
It's cool when somebody says something negative about you and then you do well. But I think it's like a double whammy because, yeah, you've disproven the people, but also it means you did something well, which is the best part. I think the best part about it is we sold out and there's a lot of interest in Forbidden Door. But I hadn't really heard that he said that. I guess I'm not surprised. But I think it's going to be a very successful show, and it's on top of the big shows we already do. So I believe we'll have another record-breaking year on pay-per-view because we've got already off to a huge start. Revolution, the biggest we've ever had for Revolution. It's gone up year over year over year, and we started out with a great show and had another awesome Revolution this year that I thought lived up to the billing and lived up to how we started Revolution, which I think it started out one of the best wrestling shows we've ever done. And then to do it this year and have, again, Revolution 22 live up to that standard and also set a pay-per-view record there. I think it was awesome. And I think we can keep it going. And so I think CM Punk's been a great investment for us time and time again. But I was surprised Eric said that. I didn't know Booker T said that about Forbidden Door, but whatever he thinks, he's definitely entitled to say his opinions, and I have no problem with that.
I want to talk about Wardlow real quick. We started AEW, you had the 4 pillars, right? Wardlow, a lot of us saw, and I don't want to say we didn't see the potential, but we saw Wardlow with MJF. This guy has become a star. Did you foresee the progression of Wardlow? I mean, what I want to know is how much have you had a hand in this presentation with the security coming out? I mean, everything's been brilliant with Wardlow. How hands-on have you been with this?
I've been hands-on, but it's a lot of people's ideas, and there's been people backstage that have really good ideas, and I put them in format, and I decide what ends up in the format and where it goes in the show and how long they have to get out to the ring and how much time's left in the show and when we go to break and things like that. But I have a lot of great people who come up with ideas, and I'm fortunate to have some smart people and then I get to pick which are the best ideas and where you do them and which week and how. So I'm very hands-on every aspect of the show. Every minute of the show, every second, because we break things down shorter because, it doesn't always take somebody a minute in an interview. It could be shorter than that. Some Sometimes people make their point in 37 seconds,
Right.
or sometimes it only takes somebody 42 seconds. The ramp's short. It only takes 46 seconds to get to the ring or whatever. So it just depends, but we're pretty hands on. And, from the beginning of the show, the opening credits, which is less than 30 seconds. And from then on, we have to track it because we only get that 2 hours, and a certain amount of it has to be commercial breaks. And it's, not it's a finite amount, and those are not flexible. Like, you can put them at different times in the show, and that's some of, trying to do it. And people don't understand, but in Dynamite, it's a 10 segment show. So you have to have 9 commercial breaks.
Right.
And with Rampage, it's a 6 segment show. So with the 10 segments, 9 breaks in Dynamite, 6 segments, 5 commercial breaks in Rampage. The first break in Rampage is always the short 90-second
Right.
hybrid picture-in-picture
Yes.
split screen. But it's, a format that has worked really well for us, and I think his star power is huge, and I really like Wardlow, and I think he's been awesome here from the beginning. And the way he's come into his own from where he started, I think it's really impressive. And he's always delivered everything we asked for him, but I think he's become a much more complete wrestler since we started.
I mean, does it feel like he's like now the 5th pillar? I mean, you had the 4, but he feels like an AEW product that is really risen to prominence, and the crowd response is insane for him now.
Yeah, he's a huge part. I mean, from the beginning, he's been a big part. I think he is a big part of the foundation.
Yeah.
And so he's certainly a foundation of AEW, and he has been awesome all along. But like I said, I think he's come really far, and he was a really good prospect at the beginning, and it's like that really great prospect. You watch him grow into what you hope they might become, and even more. And I think that's him.
I mean, he's going to be one of those guys that's, I mean, not for you, but for us, it's hard to keep him out of the title picture at some point because he's such a star. Another person, though, is Hook, who has been tremendous. But I think I want to compliment you. I think you've done a great job with Hook as far as not overexposing him. Did you understand what you needed to do with Hook? He's on the buy-in for people that have watched the show, but everybody's bought in on Hook thus far, and it's like you slow played this purposefully.
Well, he's got a lot of interest, and I think the idea was to build demand to see Hook, and then once people saw him, they want to see more and more of him. And I think we built a lot of interest in him, and his presentation is tremendous. His instincts are tremendous, and that's AEW. A lot of freedom to try and present yourself and present ideas to me and the people around me to try and get them into the show, and then I can try to make decisions about who can wrestle when, who wrestles who, and what show it's on. And then I think he has shown up with ideas. He's shown up, most importantly, and delivered in the ring time after time and again. And the fans had been interested in him because he'd been on TV, and he's a very charismatic, good-looking kid, but he had not talked.
Right.
I don't think it hurt that he was Taz's son, but I think if he had just been Taz's son and he wasn't this really charismatic, interesting-looking person who carried himself in such an interesting way and frankly had been protected to some extent for a while, then I think he would have had a great chance, but he might not have had the immediate following he did, where there was huge demand to see him in the ring, and all these things I think came together. But most importantly of all, I think the thing that, and I hope I don't get aggregated and they leave out this part, is it's him. It's Hook.
Right.
He's got it. And that is something that, when he was training, I think it was apparent that this kid has something. And so if we nurture it and don't throw him to the wolves necessarily in a bad way where, we're asking him, hey, like, go out there and do a 60-minute Iron Man match for your debut on live television. Well, it wasn't like, hey, or even, hey, do a 45-minute Iron Man match in your debut match on live television. So, we gave him really good wrestlers to get in there with and prove himself, and he did. And he had great matches, and the fans got behind him even more and more than they were from the beginning. And he's continued to build a following. And I think with Danhausen, it's even more of a following. And again, a bunch of really good ideas. And I try to take the best ideas and put them into the show, which, every second of the show, the formatting of it, I'm pretty hands-on. And I thought last week's Dynamite in particular was one of our really strong shows. I thought we had a really great go home to Double or Nothing. And I thought it started really strong with Wardlow and
Yes.
Spears and MJF all in the cage. And then the Hangman and Punk segment, really strong stuff. And the first hour was well over 1 million before the basketball game started. And then, of course, there were some viewers that were going to watch that game and catch up probably on the wrestling later.
Right.
And I think we did get a lot of them later, but the first hour was well over 1 million. And then we had the rise for the main event, which I thought was a great main event with Kyle O'Reilly and Samoa Joe. And then with Samoa Joe up at the end and the Adam Cole music and, making it very clear the Owen Hart final is at Double or Nothing going to be Samoa Joe versus Adam Cole for the first time ever, which is crazy that this is the first Samoa Joe versus Adam Cole match ever, I think. And so I love the formatting and I love meeting with great idea people and then sitting down and trying to figure out, can we do this all in 1 week? Can we do maybe we do this on Dynamite? Maybe this could be Rampage. And then putting the formats together, it's my great pleasure. And that's where I always talk about with AEW, the creativity comes from all over the place. There's great ideas all over. And I try to use the best ideas and try to find a way to put them together. And that's my favorite way. And that's the only way I really have learned is the best way to format a show.
What's the status on MGF? Obviously, MGF says things on Twitter. We don't know if it's work, shoot. As fans, we just watch. That's kind of, I guess, it's the fun of it. But what is the status with MJF right now? Like, how long is he with the company for? What is the expectation here? Can you give any insight on the future?
I can't. I mean, he's he's been a big part of the company from day one, but I can't really speculate on what he's been saying about stuff that is unrelated to his match with Wardlow.
Okay, so he's been kind of just speaking, and it's just like, all right, just let him do his thing.
It's not relating to what we're talking about on television.
Are you surprised when he does that?
No, I am not surprised for a variety of reasons. But coming out of this weekend, I think that, as of now and everything he's done in AEW, he's been a huge part of the success of the company, and he's signed here for a long time. So, it's 2022 and 2024 is a long way away.
All right. Talent. As we're getting ready to wrap this thing up in a few here, so much talent out there. And it's not something that you could have thought was going to happen when you first started.
No, it's not. There was a lot of talent signed to other companies that
Right.
are not available now. And a lot of things happened in the years of wrestling. There were a lot of changes in the market. You're absolutely right.
So how do you handle talent as, I know you hear the chatter, oh, they're signing too many people. So you got to be, are you selective or do you already know what you're going to do? It's like, oh, this person, for instance, Swerve. You see Swerve hit the market, feels like a no-brainer.
Yep.
Are there other talents that you go, I'm not sure. I'm not.
Yeah. There's a lot of those that haven't signed here.
Really?
So there's a number of people. I mean, I think just from WWE alone last year, I think at least from the start of the pandemic, they released maybe 80 wrestlers, maybe more. And I certainly didn't sign all of them. So I think a lot of the ones that didn't come, there's a lot of them I think are really good, but I probably wasn't quite sure if they would fit or if we would have TV time for them, or even some of the people we might not have TV time for, I've signed thinking that they can develop here and get, and they're very young and I like their potential a lot. So I thought it might've been early for another company to give up on some of those people. And then there's other people that are just no-brainers. Like you said, Swerve's a great example. It's a no-brainer. Great wrestler, big star, somebody I was very interested in when he went there in the first place. So I thought it was great for him to come now. That worked out really well.
I mean, it seems like it's a perfect fit. Keith Lee.
Keith Lee's a great example.
Tony, I don't know how a company looks at Keith Lee, his athleticism, his look, and says, we're not going to use him. It felt like a gift for you.
It was great. Keith Lee's a great wrestler. It was a great gift. And I completely agree. And with Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland and a number of other wrestlers, I was really surprised. And these were wrestlers that when we were competing head to head against them, these were some of the great wrestlers, top wrestlers. I felt like if I could get anybody, these were the people that we were competing with that I wanted. And Keith Lee's a great example. Swerve Strickland's a great example. There were other people on the opposition, like the Undisputed Elite, like obviously Adam Cole and Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, and a number of others that have come over where, in particular, those, Keith Lee and Swerve and Tony Storm's a great example of people who've come over from we were on head to head against them at one point, and now they're a great part of AEW.
Regal.
Lord Regal's another big example of that. Yes.
You couldn't have expected that.
I was very surprised by that.
And when you got, Okay, Blackpool Combat Club. It's amazing. Who's who originated this? Where did this come from? Is it something that you thought about? Was it Regal? Did they present it to you?
The idea of Moxley and Danielson is something I felt really strongly about. At first, the idea of them wrestling. And when John came back, I thought it would be a huge match at Revolution. And they're really good friends. And I think they had so much chemistry that it was just natural that they could have a great match that was a huge part of Revolution.
Right.
And they really beat some respect into each other on television. And then would be a great team after they have this awesome match and shake hands afterwards and have really earned each other's respect. And then they can go out and beat the hell out of everybody else in the world of wrestling. And they've gone on and done that. And when Regal became available, that was another great thing we were able to add to it and made a lot of sense. The name, the Blackpool Combat Club, I think John came up with it. I think Mox said it to me. I was on the phone with John and John said it. And I was like, yeah, it's great. I've been to Blackpool before and it's a tough place. So I thought it was really cool and very authentic. And with Regal and his involvement with Danielson and Moxley in their careers, I thought it made a ton of sense. It was cool.
I want to bring up just a few names. I want to get your thoughts. Daniel Garcia.
Yeah.
What do you think is the ceiling on this guy? It just seems like we're not even close to what he could become.
I really like Daniel Garcia. I thought he was one of the most interesting young prospects on AEW Dark. And I wanted opponents and I wanted to do something with him. And I thought, let's give him a something here. Let's try him and feature him on TV more. So I wanted opponents for Darby Allin, Eddie Kingston, and Jon Moxley in a trios match on Dynamite. So I put together in Daly's place the trio of Daniel Garcia with 2.0. Now, of course, they're all together in the Jericho Appreciation Society. They did really well. They caught, I think, fire as a team, and they were great opponents from that first match, and they got a great reaction when we announced that match and the pairing and that 2.0 would come in. And I thought, they're great veterans with outside experience.
Right.
And coming into AEW, I thought it was a great mix of an outside veteran team and a young wrestler who's been featured on Dark but hasn't really been on Dynamite or Rampage yet.
Right.
And somebody we could build up and give big matches to. And then he got all these big matches and wrestled top stars and main events like, big names, Jon Moxley and CM Punk and Bryan Danielson and Eddie Kingston, and just trying to get him in with the top names in the biggest spots we could on TV, because I think he's going to be a great wrestler for the future. I really like Daniel Garcia. So from the beginning, I really believed in him, and it's kind of like the theme of some of the other people we've talked about. You really like them, and you think these are the people I want to invest in and give an opportunity to, and then when they come good and do even better than you thought was possible, then you're really happy for them. And that Daniel Garcia is a great example of that.
Samoa Joe, a guy who some people said, oh, he's on his last legs in NXT and WWE. Comes here, obviously ROH television champion, but he looks rejuvenated.
Yeah.
Did you sense when he came in, it was like, oh, there's still a lot of juice left in that squeeze?
Yeah. You want to hear some stories?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm a huge Samoa Joe fan.
Me too.
I would have loved to have had Samoa Joe here sooner. It would have been great if he's in the beginning of AEW. He's another person we've competed against who I would love to have had here. And now another person, great example, where it's like, how did they get released? That is mind-blowing, especially knowing how much he has to, how strong he is in the ring and what a great champion he is for us right now and what a big part of the company he is. And including big main event matches. And he's done great ratings time after time since he's been here. And it's been a short time, but he's just hit home run after home run. I talked to him on the phone and he said he had a lot left in him and he really wanted to have a big run on TV and he wanted to go and he was serious about it. And he had a lot to offer outside the ring, but he also had a lot to offer inside the ring. Because I think Samoa Joe is so interesting. I thought he'd be great outside the ring, but he was like, no, I'm 100%. I am better than I've been. I really want to go. I'm excited. So I was fired up. And in putting the Ring of Honor pay-per-view together, I thought it was really cool because in the show, we've heard promos from the Hall of Famers in Ring of Honor, the initial class, and the original management, I'm sorry, not the original management, the prior management before me, the prior management and their leadership put together a Ring of Honor Hall of Fame. and their choices, and I think they're great choices. I'm just pointing out that it was already done when I bought the company.
Right.
Was a class of CM Punk, Bryan Danielson. They had sent in videos. I was not going to have them on the show. And I think, to be honest, we have a great relationship with TBS and TNT. And I think the right thing to do is keep CM Punk and Bryan Danielson focused on Dynamite and Rampage, where they've been two of the main stars in the great launch of Rampage. And they've had some of the biggest matches. And the two of them have done some of the highest rated segments on Rampage. And of course, the move of Dynamite to TBS, they both came in ahead of it and have been a big part of why it's been so successful this year for us on TBS. So not trying to take that, to confuse the brands completely, but then CM Punk and Bryan Danielson, very respectful videos talking about how much their time in Ring of Honor has meant to them. They've already sent those in. You've got the Briscoes wrestling for the tag team championship, the Ring of Honor World Tag title on Supercard in a big match, but Samoa Joe is the other Hall of Famer. When you had Punk, Danielson, the Briscoes, and Samoa Joe. I guess 5 Hall of Famers in 4 spots with 2 Briscoes with Mark and Jay.
Right.
So the only Hall of Famer who was not involved in the card was Samoa Joe, and nobody knew that I'd talked to him or that this was possible. So I thought he'd be great surprise at the end. And also there's like this cool thing with the Ring of Honor titles, because the Ring of Honor World Champion, Jonathan Gresham, the Ring of Honor World Television Champion now is Samoa Joe. And I thought it would be, he'd be a great television champion. And the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, the longest reigning Tag Team Champions of all time, of course, would be Jonathan Gresham and Jay Lethal. Jay Lethal was the longest reigning TV champion of all time. And the TV champion now is Samoa Joe. The longest reigning world champion of all time is Samoa Joe. And the current champion is Gresham. So it's like across the 3 titles, you've got all 3 guys, Jonathan Gresham, Samoa Joe, represented twice across 3 championships. That's pretty cool, between like the current champion or the longest reigning champion. So I thought there was a unique opportunity there at the end of the pay-per-view after Gresham's match, set up the stakes that a lot of people interested in the world title. And obviously Lethal has that long history with him. And also, Lethal had taken big shortcuts to beat Lee Moriarty. And we'd seen on television, Lethal had come close a bunch of times, including top wrestlers like Adam Cole and Jon Moxley, some of the biggest stars in all of AEW and really all of wrestling when you're talking about them, and some of the big wrestlers Lethal had faced. And Adam Cole took a shortcut to beat him, and Lethal had really not used shortcuts. He started taking shortcuts when he beat Lee Moriarty with a low blow. Then he came out at the end with Sanjay. And of course, we got Satnam and later involved with Sanjay, but we at first got Sanjay and Jay Lethal involved. And it was an interesting scene, I thought, to set up with Samoa Joe coming into Ring of Honor. Now, that is how it was conceived, to have Samoa Joe out there at the end, kind of saving. At first, not only was it Gresham out there, but Moriarty tried to help too. And Moriarty had already been hosed earlier in the night by Jay Lethal. So I thought it made sense to get Lee out there and give him a little spotlight at the end too. He deserves. And then have Joe out there with the baby faces, Gresham and Moriarty at the end. But really, Yved made it clear that Jay Lethal's getting a spotlight here, and he's gone on, and we had a great match in the main event of Rampage a couple weeks ago with Takeshita.
Yes.
And he's definitely a great wrestler. And I think now, if he's going to take the shortcuts, it gives him even more of a dangerous element to Jay Lethal. But with Samoa Joe, it was dangerously close to not happening, where the thing at the end, because there was all kinds of flight problems in Florida, and the awesome pilots that had flown with me to Texas that day, they were it was kind of the day off, because I'd flown in for the show the day before, and the day of the show was going to be their day off, and there were no flights. There was no way to get Joe out. So if you saw like a photo Joe posted on social media of him on a private jet, it was him coming in, because they flew from Texas back to Florida to pick him up. And it's even crazier than it sounds, because there was a ground stop at all these airports around Florida. And I was trying to find someplace he could go to that would be unaffected, because his flights have been canceled. And if he waited, there was no way at that point he was going to make it. So they just took off for Cross City, Florida, which I've never heard of. I didn't know there was. And I asked all these people, a number of people backstage who live in Florida, who've driven up and down Florida almost everywhere. Samoa Joe and I both live in Florida, and neither of us has heard of Cross City, Florida. So these awesome two pilots, they came up with Cross City, and I asked Joe if he'd heard of it. He had not, and it was like we looked it up, and he started driving there, and it took a few hours for him to get there. It took a few hours for them to fly from Texas to Florida, and then scoop Joe up, and then fly right back. And he made it minutes before the main event to get out there for the end of the show. So it was barely something that we were able to do, and it was really fortunate. And private aviation definitely bailed us out for what was a great moment on a great show. And I thought I just had to make sure it was definitely worth the trip, and it was worth making sure we did, because I thought it was a really special way to end Supercard, and I wanted that to be a debut for Samoa Joe. The reaction of the crowd was amazing. It was the most successful Ring of Honor pay-per-view in many years, and it would be up there with the top 3 or 4 they've ever done, I think, and definitely with the top 3, I would say, along with with this Supercard we just did, Supercard of Honor 2022, along with probably the MSG New Japan event they did in collaboration, and All In. So those would be their big 3 shows. And I think, so we hit new heights for the modern Ring of Honor, and also we're able to introduce some of the stars of the past and stars for the future. And Samoa Joe coming in was a huge part of it. And I didn't think the Supercard would have been the same if he hadn't been able to make it. So it was huge that we were able to pull it off, but it was a close call.
Jeez. All right, a couple more names for you. One, Sammy Guevara. You've talked about this before with the fans, how they're reacted to him, and it feels like we've hit a gray area with Scorpio, Dan Lambert, Sammy, Ty. Frankie's always seemed very on the babyface side. Is this by design now? Because I know you listen to the fans' reactions.
Yeah, now it is. Now I am doing the best I can with to make it something polarizing, and I think it was added a really interesting element with them stealing the belts. But also, it's over after the Double or Nothing. So I think now that story kind of, it's we're past Double or Nothing now. So I think what we were talking about is we've put it behind us now.
Okay, but you can't anticipate how the crowd's going to continue to react to Sammy from this point. So do you have to play off of that?
Well, I think I've taken that into account now. I've had a long time to put perspective on it, and I had some plans that were already in motion for this pay-per-view before the crowd reacted differently than I expected, which is great. And I think the crowd should react however they want. And then it's on us to do something that they're gonna again react to. And I think the most important thing is they reacted to it, and they had a strong reaction. And then nobody was getting hurt. And as long as nobody's getting hurt and they're having a strong reaction, it's probably good for the future, even if it's not what you expected. So I've pivoted since.
One other name that I want to talk about is Statlander. On Rampage tonight, this crowd was super behind her. It's probably one of the strongest reactions we've heard for Statlander. Is there ever a moment where you book a match, you see the finish, you go, shit, I got a different direction I want to go with this now because of how I just saw this crowd react?
No, I really like Chris Statlander. That's why when the spot in the tournament opened up, I thought she'd be really strong featured, and she advanced through the quarterfinals of the semifinals.
But you think she'd be this over? Like tonight,
I thought she was going to get a really strong reaction. Yeah? I mean, the crowd really was behind her, and I think that's really good for us for the future. So, and if that got heat, that's good, because I think people will get behind Stat more in the future. She's going to get more and more opportunities. She's a big part of our plans. So she's figured in. So the fact that people are really behind her, that only builds for the future. I think it's great.
Last question. This is 2022. We're 3 years in. You couldn't have predicted how this thing would have unfolded. Obviously, you're happy with what you've done thus far. But when you look towards the future, you've accomplished so much already. What is the next big thing that you're after now? I mean, obviously, there's the big monster out there that you want to conquer, which is WWE. Great. But there's got to be shorter term plans that you're looking at and things that you want to do, maybe internationally. I don't know. What are we thinking, Tony?
I would love to expand AEW and hopefully do shows outside of U.S. and other countries, expand our international footprint. Now AEW is available in 130 countries.
That's good.
It's amazing. And I think I'd like to continue to expand that reach, build new partnerships. The most important thing we can do is expand and continue our partnership with Warner Brothers Discovery. I was just there at the office of Warner Brothers Discovery very recently and saw the new offices of our new partners, the new company. And I met with the new management, and it's so awesome. It was very probably the best meeting I've ever had in my life. I've never come out of a meeting feeling better than knowing the resources of the new Warner Brothers Discovery, the largest content creator in the world, and their expertise and how strong the management is, and that's why they're in the position they're in. The leadership of Discovery, I'm just getting to know them. There were already really strong people at Warner Media who are still there and great supporters of AEW from the very beginning, before we even had a name or before we'd ever gone in the air. People that I talked to this project about that are still a huge part of Warner Brothers Discovery, people like Sam Linsky, who's been a great supporter of us. And to have the new management of Discovery, it's really strong. And I'm very fortunate to have met them and gotten their blessing with what we're doing, and that they're happy with what we're doing, and that AEW is a big part of their plans and what they want to do with the new company and with TBS and TNT going forward under the new management, that we're a big part of it. That's awesome. So that's the biggest thing in the world to me, because the best thing I can do for pro wrestling, I really believe, is to put good wrestling matches on as often as I can on TBS and TNT, hopefully every week, and hopefully more than one great match every week on TBS and TNT, hopefully with something behind it. But sometimes they just happen unexpectedly, but a lot of times there's build to them too, and those are great. And sometimes the great wrestling matches just sneak up on you. But the fact that there's awesome matches every month on TBS and TNT, and most weeks there's more than one, it's great. And this week there's been a few great ones this past week as we record this. And I think that's typical at this point. And the fact that there's wrestling, and often great wrestling, on TBS and TNT, that's the greatest thing I can do with my life for the wrestling fans and people like me, is make sure that's still a thing, because for almost 20 years it wasn't a thing. And for really over 20 years on TBS, there was no pro wrestling. And for almost 20 years on TNT, there was none. So nobody wants to go 2 decades again without wrestling on TBS or TNT. And I think keeping wrestling strong there, keeping AEW strong there would be the best thing I can do. And that's my biggest focus. And Nancy Daniels is going to be a great leader, I know now. And I read so many great things, and having met her and seen firsthand how strong of a team she has and what a great leader she is, and how supportive and cool she is, I'm really even more energized and positive than I've ever been about AEW and about working with a strong media partner, Warner Brothers Discovery, because we all know how strong wrestling can be when there's great support on TBS and TNT for the pro wrestling.
Last question. Where is this AEW game? Do you have any idea if we're going to get in 2022, or are we looking at
I'm not going to put an exact date on it, but we've put a lot of time and effort into this development of this game. It's going to be great. A lot of the great stars of AEW are in it, and a number of people who've come in even in the past year will be featured in that game. And since a lot of big stars have come in the past year, I think that's it. And we've added some stars along the way that I think are really important to get in the game for everybody. And so we'll have a great roster when we launch, and then we'll still be able to add people through DLC as we go, but making sure we get the best possible roster when we start. We signed so many wrestlers in the last year, especially in the recent months, we may not be able to get every single person in, but people that have signed pretty recently, we're still trying to get some of the biggest names in, because we think that's the best chance for the launch of the game, is to have some of the biggest stars in the world of wrestling in the game. And we already had a lot of them, and we're adding more.
Beautiful, beautiful. So listen, Tony, I appreciate this time. I've been waiting a long time to have this conversation with you.
You too.
The thing that I appreciate more than anything else is that you've always been a fan first. And I think that's so important for the things that we love. And it bleeds through everything that you do. Even when you're on social media, tweeting whatever that you're tweeting, we can sense that you're a fan of what you do, and it permeates through everything that you do. So I appreciate the time so much.
Thank you, Andreas. I really appreciate you having me on your show. I've been for a long time, I've been looking forward to it too, coming out here, and I haven't been to Las Vegas in 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's great.
It's been a while. Is Double or Nothing staying in Vegas?
Forever. I'm going to keep Double or Nothing in Vegas as long as we can. We have great relationships here. This is a great event. Double or Nothing started in Las Vegas, and I want to keep Double or Nothing in Las Vegas permanently. And we have a home here in Las Vegas. And as long as we can do it safely, and now we're back and live touring's resumed. It's great to be back. It was awesome. I think doing all the shows in Jacksonville, including Double or Nothing 20 and Double or Nothing 21. But now for Double or Nothing 22, it's cool being back here, and hopefully we'll always be back here. And Double or Nothing will be an event we do as long as I'm around.
Man. Again, listeners, that was Tony Khan. This is Andreas Hale. This has been one hell of a conversation. And I hope we get to do it again in the future and have some new things to shed some light on. Always a lot to talk about with you.
I hope so too. I really hope so too. I'd love to see you. You're always welcome to visit us on the road or in Jacksonville between shows when I'm there, or in London, or wherever we go. But certainly when we're here in Las Vegas, I always like to stop in and see you.
All right, be careful with them invites, man. I'll show up anyway. I'll be knocking at your door.
You're always welcome.
So, guys, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. Tony, thank you again. And we'll be back. Kel Dansby, my co-host, was away, but we'll pick this thing up next week. But until next time, we're out of here. Peace.